What's up, tribe? It's Lanny Smith, the founder of Actively Black. We're here for a special episode of No Fabrication. Today, I have a special guest. We have the creator of the Juneteenth Flag, Mr. Ben Haith. This is an honor to be able to talk to the creator. I'm sitting here with Living Black History. So I'm glad that you made it here so that we can have this conversation. And we're going to jump right into it. So, Mr. Ben Haith, before we get into the creation of the flag, I'd like the audience, the tribe, to know a little bit about the man behind the flag. So, talk to us about where you're from, where you grew up. What was life like for you that led to you becoming an activist before creating the flag?
I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut. Some people consider it one of New York City's bedroom communities. So I've been influenced by the city of New York. I watched their media. I rooted for the Brooklyn Dodgers when they were here in Brooklyn. I watched the other two baseball teams that New York had. They had three. And, when I graduated from high school, I went to college in Ohio and then on to Los Angeles. And from the Los Angeles, I went into the U.S. Army. After the U.S. Army, I worked in New York City for 6 years. And I worked in the Madison Avenue district.
Okay.
Back in the day, they said it was Madison Avenue, but I added district to it because it's larger than just Madison Avenue. So I worked in a marketing and advertising agency. Matter of fact, more than one, but I learned a lot in those agencies about marketing and advertising and research, which is really essential almost to anything these days.
Right.
And I believe we're living in a new era, as Vice President Kamala Harris said. I don't know, a lot of people, I don't know how they received her saying that, but it registered with me because I feel it and see it in my everyday life with the new technology, the information that we have.
Yeah.
And so after I left New York, I moved to Boston and raised a family. And then one day someone referred me to a social service agency because they thought I could work in the community. So I never thought that I would be working in a community. That wasn't any objective of mine. So I took the position of an anti-crime violence advocate, and that kind of led me, Lanny, into activism because I don't know, something just took over me and said, hey, look, there are things we can do in the community together, the neighbors and, the residents and the organization. So I became an activist, and within that description, I became an organizer.
Yeah.
You have to have some organizing.
Yeah.
And then so I learned a lot.
Would you say that, when I think about some of the stories that, my mother and father, told me about, the Black Panther Party and different organizations like that, would you say you were influenced at all by any of those movements coming up, or how was the social landscape of the country during that time? How did that impact, you in your activism and your work?
Well, that's the question Lanny just asked is an interesting one. As it pertains to me, I, like many people in this country, saw what was going on in the civil rights movement, what was happening. Uh, Martin Luther King Jr. I knew he was. It took me a while to grasp the gravity of that time. I don't know why. I'm trying to be truthful, but I learned from them. I learned from Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X was somebody that really influenced me because I used to listen to him on the radio here in New York City. Even before I moved to New York City, I would be listening to him being interviewed on the New York radio. Stay up late listening to that man. So maybe he influenced me more than the others, but as I got older, I realized what they were doing was changing the landscape of this country, which needed to be changed.
And did you see, obviously, like I'm from the South. There's a legacy of racism, of racial discrimination, of obviously slavery that we'll get into in the South. You growing up, in the North, in the East Coast. What was the difference in maybe your experience growing up? Do you think that maybe the racism was more covert?
Yes.
Was it something that you did, maybe it wasn't as in your face as maybe what was going on in the South? Do you think maybe that's why you felt it a little differently?
Well, you just asked me another important question, an interesting question. And as a youth, when I was growing up, as I look back on the time I was a youth and growing up in this country, I believe my parents, like a number of parents who came from the South, some kind of way they shielded their children from the truth down there. Even though my brothers and I, we would be taken down south to visit our relatives. Even then, we weren't really given the information of what they had to go through. I learned that later, Lanny.
So, like, even going to school for you, was it always integrated when you were going to school, or like what was that experience?
Well,
like?
at Stanford, it was integrated,
Okay.
but there were some things they could have done better. I'm thinking about something else now, but the North had their own way of they had their own racism, different kind. I can't think of the terminology right now, but it's different from the South. Even when I was down south and went to a movie, we had to sit in the balcony, separate water fountains, but it never penetrated me to the point where I realized how inhumane that the people had to go through all of that down south and more. The lynchings, the intimidations, it goes on and on. It's horrible, and it's no wonder there's some people who don't want to confront the reality of our history, which I tell people, this country has a history of violence throughout its history.
Built on it. Built on violence. Yeah. So, the other thing that I found interesting as I was reading your story was, the fact that you did grow up, in the Northeast, and for me, growing up in Houston, Texas, with the events of Juneteenth, happening in Galveston, Texas, it was something that we always knew about, right? We grew up like knowing about Juneteenth, and I realized there were people outside of Texas Black people outside of Texas that didn't know about Juneteenth. You know what I mean? And it's I didn't realize that. And then even when you think about the fact that I think it didn't become a federal holiday until 2021,
That's
right?
right,
So
yeah.
that's 4 years ago, right? So can you connect the dots for me as far as being that far removed from the South? What was it that became that passion for you, or that connected you, that drove you to wanting to design and create the Juneteenth flag? What was it how did you find out? How did you learn about Juneteenth? What was the thing that sparked it for you?
Well, Lenny, before I answer that question about the flag,
Yep.
you made me think of what became a wake-up call in terms of my consciousness about the racism in this country. It came about with me in the city of Boston. When I moved to Boston, it was in the early 70s, and they had issues with race. Boston was segregated. They had to desegregate the schools. I know of people who were intimidated because if they went into the wrong neighborhood. It happened to me. I went into a neighborhood with some people, and they were telling me, you know what, we're gonna have to leave because we're being followed. Whoa, and then I said, like I said, it was a reality set in. And I believe God had me overhearing a conversation about Juneteenth in Boston, which made me think, well, I heard that name, and in my childhood, I remember hearing the name Juneteenth on my Aunt Anna's farm in Blackstone, Virginia. She was talking to my mother, whose name is Virginia. And they were talking about Juneteenth, and the name stuck with me, and I think it was reinforced because my Aunt Anna, her husband's name was June. So, hey, look, I'm not a scientist. People now talking more about what's going on in our memories and
subconscious and all that.
Subconsciousness and so forth. So it's the unknown, but I was affected by it, and I said, hey, let me do some research on Juneteenth, and I saw how important it was and significant it was. I said, maybe my marketing skills kicked in, and I decided it needed some symbol to represent what African American people and their ancestors and descendants went through. And so I worked on it. It took some time to reach, the final design, but God was at work again. Here it is.
Yeah. But one of the things that you just touched on was actually leading to my next question about the symbolism of the flag, right? So
yeah.
When you started working on that symbolism, and we posted about it on social media today, and actually had somebody write me and ask, well, what does it mean? What do the colors mean? What does the star mean? What does this mean? And I said, I'm gonna get a chance to talk to the creator today, and I'm gonna ask him that question so we can hear that explanation from the creator's mouth himself. So can you walk us through and talk us through the symbolism and what does it mean, on the Juneteenth flag?
Well, I'll tell you, Lanny. Again, I believe our creator, people refer to as God, was using me.
Mm-hmm.
And I contacted some artists that I knew and tried to get a design for the flag. I started off with sketching what I thought the flag should look like, but I wanted to consult, refer with artists. I learned that in Madison Avenue, okay? So, to make a long story short, a woman by the name of Lisa Jean Graff called me one day and said she had heard about me seeking out someone that designed the Juneteenth flag, and she was interested. I said, sure, I'd like to meet with you. So I met with her downtown. I worked in downtown Boston, right next to City Hall. But before that, to answer your question about the design, and one of the key things that happened was I was listening to one of the public broadcasting systems shows called Nova, and I began to I found out that Nova meant new beginning, a bursting. So I'm thinking, well, maybe this is a holiday that's old, but our people have gone through a lot in this country, more than we realize. Mm-hmm. And I said, we're a new people, but at the same time, we're part of this country. We help build this country. We help build this economy. We did the hard work. We had some people who were exceptional, scientists and so forth, and we haven't gotten our credit. They didn't even give our ancestors the citizenship. And I said, well, just because they didn't give us our citizenship, our ancestors' citizenship, didn't mean they weren't citizens. So I believe our country needs to give our ancestors their citizenship posthumously. Mm-hmm. Hey, we made a mistake. You were citizens. We're going to give it to you.
Yeah.
Because you deserve it.
Yeah.
They went through a lot.
Yeah. Not because we asking for a handout.
No.
But because they deserve it.
That's
because
right.
it was earned.
That's right.
And yeah. And so would you say is that why you kept the colors, the red, white, and blue?
I'm glad you say that.
Flag?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Lanny, because that's the reason. I said, hey, look, I knew about the Pan-African flag, and I knew there would be some controversy. There's some people who were saying, hey, we don't need another flag, no flag. I don't know. Our ancestors made this country great. How's that one? They helped make this country great.
Facts. I mean, that's not an opinion.
No,
that's not an opinion. I mean, when you actually do the research and you look back to the economic impact of slavery itself, right? At one point in time, 75% of the world's cotton came from the United States of America. 75%. When you look at the, today, what in today's value, you're talking about trillions of dollars.
That's right.
Of what not only the product was, not only what the labor was, but then all of the industries that profited off of that. So a lot of people try to relegate slavery to, this was just the Southern thing, right? But a lot of people, when you uncover this, they don't understand. Like, we're in New York. Wall Street started as a slave auction.
See,
they don't know that. They don't know that. Some of Aetna and New York Life, some of these the biggest insurance companies that exist today, started by insuring the bodies of slaves, so that if those slaves died or could not work, those slave owners actually got paid and got reparations for the bodies of the slaves that they owned. So there were entire industries, from the railroad industry to the banking industry to the insurance industry, that were built off of slavery. And so when you talk about earned, when you talk about a whole nother conversation of reparations, people like to say that we're asking for a handout, and no. This is what was earned.
That's
and
right.
This country does not become the biggest economy in the entire world without 400 years of free labor off the backs of black people. So
and the labor,
yeah.
as you said so well, a lot of it came from our intelligence. It wasn't all manual. We were thinkers. We were creators.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. So we have by the time this episode airs, it'll be public knowledge, but we've got a collection, a line that we're launching with black farmers, so that the product, the shirts, the hoodies, are made from cotton grown by black farmers, right?
Yep.
And one of the conversations that we were having was dispelling this notion that it was just the labor, when in fact, one of the reasons why the international slave trade, they went to Africa, was because the knowledge of being able to grow crops on barren land was the reason why they actually specifically went to Africa.
They learned from our ancestors
that have been doing this for thousands of years,
yes.
Right? So it wasn't just the physical labor. It was, they brought people over who had the intellect and the knowledge on how do we turn this land into profitable, to grow these crops. Yeah.
So you sound like a historian to me. A good one.
This is building actively black is a passion filled and a purpose driven thing for me. And the tagline for actively black is "There's greatness in our DNA." And the reason why it's so important.
That's good. Wow, that's powerful.
No, the
DNA. Hey.
Yes.
America, wake up.
Yes. And the reason why it's so important that's the tagline is because through the propaganda, through the erasure of our history and of who we really are, we're always bombarded with the negative stereotypes and the negative imagery of who we are. But there's so much greatness when you peel back all these layers. So,
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can I take an intervention?
Of course.
I'll be right back.
Show.
Make your call.
Cut. Break.
Yeah.
All right.
You're headed to Long Island post tonight? This evening you're going to Long Island?
In the morning. First thing in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
You two are being so good.
Right.
So good.
Amazing. My nephews would be in here jumping out to
I thought we were about to bring back the 80s break dancing and pop locking. Phenomenal questions. Good. It's organic, which is great. That's the key element to, I guess, any type of interview. And you're making it feel very comfortable.
No, I had so many questions when we were on Zoom, but I was like, I want to save them. I just want to ask them in person. You know what I mean? And just get those raw answers. So.
Do you mind when it's all said and done? Post. I want to get a picture of myself, you.
Oh, of course.
My uncle and my cousin and his kids.
Of course.
Want to be in there, just the adults will just take a picture because I think down the road, and anything we send out, we'll let you know first to say, hey, is this okay? We don't know quite where we'll put it yet, but somewhere down the road because. A lot is happening at such an accelerated pace. You want to kind of be prepared for everything and anything.
Amazing. How was the? Oh, you were coming from a conference. I was gonna say, how was the drive up?
Drive wasn't bad.
Wasn't good.
Dover. The East Coast is so
Right,
compact,
right.
especially once you hit the turnpike and the I-95, or so literally mile wise. I mean, from Dover, Delaware to here, what is it, like 3 hours? Three. Yeah, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
You pass Philadelphia, you pass Newark, you pass so many cities too.
All right, we're good to go. So let's jump back into the design of the flag. So we talked about the colors, why you kept it red, white, and blue. You know that. Go ahead if you want to expand on that.
The finish, the design.
Yep.
With the bursting star, the Nova, the one star I thought would represent all the 50 states, but at the same time representing the state you came from, the
Texas.
Lone Star State.
Texas.
So,
yes.
Again, God was saying, hey, look, these things are important. And the red part of the flag is curved because it's the star emerging into the universe. Some people might say the heavens. It says, we got a lot to learn about the universe, I tell you that. So I don't know if I left anything out.
No. So it's like a supernova. It's a star.
Yeah, that's it. That's right.
Expanding.
Because we're a super people.
Okay.
After all we've been through,
man,
and still going through it.
You ain't lying.
They won't leave us alone. But guess what? The Creator's watching all this.
But you know why I think that is? I think it's because even though many of us may not know, I think they know.
Oh yeah, they know.
They know.
Yep.
And that's why there's that constant there's that constant effort to keep that foot on the neck. There's that constant effort to keep the oppression in a place where we can't ever collectively rise.
You know, just to hear what you had to say, it made me think of how it's difficult for some people to accept the truth because it's been a part of their culture. And who knows what else. Maybe their DNA, or it needs to be looked into, researched, and explained so we can be a healthy country. We're supposed to be the leaders of the free world. I think the world is becoming a community, the different countries. We're becoming that. And there's some people who are tampering with that. They want to hold on to the old guard, the old ways, but the way that's going to happen is the way our Creator wants it. And that's why I think this country, even though it's gone through terrible trauma and violence, God has protected it. And this country is a miracle. And you don't mess with God, it's miracles.
Yeah, and in some ways, the country's become cocky because of that protection. You know what I mean? Like you think about some of the conflict that we've been able to avoid just because of our geographic, placement in the world. We've got these two oceans on either side of us that have allowed us to kind of feel
they know it,
like we're like we're on top of the world, you know what I mean, and isolated. And I think that's actually a dangerous mentality. As you know, we're all interconnected in some form or fashion. So
and Lanny, there's a number of factors that you are speaking about, but I think, I know there's some issues people have with social media, but I think social media is a miracle. It gives the average person, it can give the average person a platform, and it is giving them platforms.
Yes.
And some of them don't understand the importance of that.
Yeah.
When I brought up, you only heard certain things from certain people, and now you can, hey, let's see what this freedom of speech is all about.
Right. And that's even, the purpose of this. being able to spread the word, people to see your face, to know who is the man behind the Juneteenth flag.
There's God behind it.
Understood. But you were a vessel that he used. So
he used me.
So we definitely want to we definitely want to acknowledge that. And even for me, as somebody who loves history, I didn't learn about you until recently. You know what I mean? And so
I could tell you love history.
So my next question to you on that is, what year did this become official, and like what were the steps for it to have that designation of being an official flag? Like what did you have to do in order? Like was it a court procedure? Like what actually had to happen from the design of it to?
Yeah. Well, you know, you asked some interesting questions. You're a good interviewer.
Thank you.
I thought that, you know, trying to be realistic, the flag had to be tested, just like in marketing. Samples, you know, I learned. And I said, you know, but it was a gift that Dr. Ronald Myers, who's a medical doctor, called me one day. He had an organization called the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation, and he said, he asked me, hey, we like the flag, we would like to use it for our organization. And after he told me what he had accomplished with his advocacy and this organizing throughout the country to make Juneteenth a national holiday, I thought, hey, well, look, take the flag and use it for your organization. So he helped promote the flag along with his movement to make Juneteenth a holiday. And unfortunately, he passed away before Juneteenth became a holiday, but his wife and his children are still with us, and we work with them. And there's a Juneteenth family in this country. And
And for those who don't know, and I wanna make sure I say this, because I was having a conversation about the Tulsa massacre recently, and there are a lot of people who didn't know about it, and some people even feel shame about not knowing about it. And I was like, yo, the grace that you have to give to yourself is that there have been intentional efforts to keep the education about some of these things out of school, for us to not learn about these things. So for those people who don't know what Juneteenth actually is and what it's about, can you give us, you know, a quick rundown on what is Juneteenth? What is the reason why on June 19th we're celebrating, and why we're waving this flag? What is Juneteenth?
Well, you know, Lanny, I like to try to keep messages simple. So I believe Juneteenth, when people see Juneteenth, hear Juneteenth, they should automatically think of freedom. This country espouses to be a country of freedom. Juneteenth is freedom, not only for the people who were in slavery and their descendants, but Juneteenth represents humanity. We are here to help each other, make life better for each other, and some people are going to have to understand that's going forward. We're going to be better humans. We've learned from our history.
We should have learned from our history anyway. And those who are actively trying to erase history and keep people from knowing history, there's nefarious reasons for why they're trying to do that.
It's unrealistic.
Yeah.
That's me saying it. I think it's unrealistic. I think it's not going to happen.
Unfortunately, what I've been seeing is that the same power of social media that allows us to get the word out like this has also been used to spread misinformation and disinformation to get people going the wrong way. So the same tactics with propaganda that has always existed has now been being used with these platforms. And unfortunately, these social media platforms have also become compromised once they've started to align themselves with some of these political figures. And that's unfortunate. But, you know, the power is always with the people, you know what I mean? And speaking of that, I at least want to say this. I don't know how you feel about this, but I want to say this. Juneteenth is something that everybody should be celebrating.
Yes.
You know, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, everybody. I see black people on Cinco de Mayo wearing sombreros and drinking margaritas. I see black people on St. Patrick's Day wearing green, you know, with the stickers and the shirts that saying "Kiss me, I'm wearing green" or whatever. Like we celebrate everybody's thing, but it seems when it comes to the celebrations and the holidays for black people and black liberation and black freedom, everybody else seems to kind of stay away from it, and it only seems to be us in that celebration. And so, you know, what I would like to say is that, you know, if you are for humanity, you should be celebrating Juneteenth.
That's right.
If you are about, you know, love and freedom for all people, you should be celebrating Juneteenth. You know, obviously it means something special, you know, to black people, but you know, I would be confident in progress being made the day that I see other people truly embracing Juneteenth the way that we'll be popping firecrackers on July 4th and celebrating everything else. You know what I'm saying? So,
well, you know, Lanny, what you said, I agree with. But this thing, it's a word. I've become somewhat of a wordsmith since I left the workforce. So I'm looking at words and people's names, and there's a word that comes to my mind after hearing what you just said, and that's reality. Folks, we need to examine what reality is and see if it's connected to what we're supposed to be as human beings, because we're all made from the same cloth. Might have different colors. Underneath, the color's the same.
I mean, that's a word. I mean, that's
I've learned that from Juneteenth.
Really?
Yeah. Juneteenth, it was a wake-up call for me.
How so? How would you say Juneteenth was a wake-up call for you?
Well, it made me look at the history, and again, I just so many things I've had to consider that I never thought that I would be interested in. But I'm interested in humanity. Yeah. Whoopi Goldberg used that word was criticized for using it on the show that she's on. But when she said it, I said, you know, she didn't say anything wrong. You know, people don't understand. I don't think they better find out what the humanity is about. It's not just a word.
Yeah. And truth be told, I think the lack of it is that's really the real problem, right? The lack of humanity. When I'm doing my research and looking back at some of these things, you see the images, right? You see the images of the lynchings, and the thing that always strikes me is that there will be crowds there as if, you know, dressed up as if this was like a sporting event, and they would bring their kids to watch, black men being lynched and then take pictures in front of human bodies swinging.
Yeah.
And then use those as postcards. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's a lack of humanity that I really just can't wrap my mind around that level of evil. You know what I mean?
You use the right word. That's another word people are going to have to examine, include myself, because that's evil. Yeah, I better find out more about evil. But what you just said, it made me think of what happened in your state of Texas. I don't know how long ago it was. A black man was
drug behind
drove on a truck and pulled.
Yeah.
And I remember Reverend Jesse Jackson, he was just, he went to Texas, I believe.
Yeah.
And I said, what is this?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be a free country, and what's
Yeah. It's crazy you bring that up, because I see people all the time talk about like, oh, this stuff happened so long ago, and it's really a manipulative tactic that they use to not have to face the truth and the reality, like you say. But that's something that happened in my lifetime. You know what I mean? And being from Houston, being from Texas, my mother's from Louisiana, so we would go back to visit my grandmother, and when we drive back, and there was literally towns that it was a known fact, like, oh, we don't stop there when we drive to Louisiana.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid asking my mom, like, well, why don't we stop there? It's like, oh yeah, the Klan is there.
Yeah.
Or like, oh yeah, when the sun goes down there and you black, it's trouble if you caught in those towns. This is my childhood. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So when people say, oh, this was so long ago, I think it's a deflection.
No.
That until this country ever decides to be honest with itself about what it really is and what its past really is, it's gonna forever be haunted, right? Because even if this nation likes to say that it's a Christian nation, but one of the things that I learned growing up in the church is about confessing your sins and asking for forgiveness, right?
There you go.
This country, the sins that it has committed against its own people, its own citizens, instead of confessing that, asking for forgiveness and making those wrongs right, it's just continue to cover them up and make excuses for them. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice.
Well,
but
no, Lanny, you're very articulate, and it makes me think about the word again, which I need to find out more about, and that's the word evil. I've been hearing about evil and things pertaining to evil all my life, but I really need to know more about it, and I think that's something that the American people need to look into.
Yeah, I think with a lot of things we disconnect from it as if it's a mythical thing. We disconnect from it as if it's like an ancient thing.
Yeah,
that
it only happened in that country.
It happened over there. It happens over there. It happened back then.
Yeah.
Not realizing that like we're so interconnected, not only across the world but also like through time. I think for some reason we have this weird fascination with thinking that we're somehow disconnected from what has happened before us, when it's all interconnected. You know what I mean? And so the fight, when we read about, whether it's in the Bible, you're reading about the fight versus good and evil, it's not like that, oh, that was solved and that ended. That fight just continues through every generation. Your generation has had to have its fight. The next generation has had to have its fight. My generation, and the generation after, every generation is continuing to have that fight. And unfortunately, I think our country is the worst at this, of sweeping things under the rug. You know what I
The
mean?
masters at it.
Yeah. So to get back to Juneteenth, the flag, where do you see, like, what's your hope for the future of the flag, Juneteenth celebration? We know that the current administration is talking about trying to take everything away from Black History Month to, all federal holidays that they deem to be discriminatory, including Juneteenth. I'm under the mindset that we don't need permission to celebrate us. So regardless of what this administration of the government says, this is something that we can celebrate regardless. But what are your thoughts on the future of Juneteenth? Where would you like to see, happen with this flag? What are your thoughts on the future?
Well, I've been blessed to have input into a symbol that represents humanity. And God had a lot to do with this undertaking, and I believe we're a spiritual people. I believe human beings are given a spirituality. I've learned this through Juneteenth, and I believe this spirituality is what is going to protect us from the continuation of those forces of which you spoke of. Mm-hmm. Reality, they're not going to stop. They're going to try to hold on to what they believe is good. But our spiritual nature, I'm optimistic about us, the young children, like my grandchildren. They don't want to live in a world, in a country like it has been in the past. So I have faith in humanity, even though it has had some difficulty in finding out what its purpose is. But we're going to have to find the way to live together on this, the home that our Creator gave to us. And not only did our Creator give us this home, He gave us things in which we can live with. We take things for granted, water and air and food and so forth. And we have institutions, we have marriages, it goes on and on and on. And where does it come from? It doesn't come from the detractors. It comes from spirituality. And from the spirituality comes miracles.
Speaking of miracles, I think this is the best way to wrap this up. It's a miracle that we're sitting here together. Your family reached out to us, and
that was a blessing.
And yeah, it's just incredible the way God works. And said, hey, we're the family of Ben Haith, the creator of the Juneteenth flag. We'd like to connect with you, and we've been able to have some different meetings and put something together to officially now have this partnership with you and your family that we're incredibly honored and proud of. So just wanted to ask you, how does it feel, to have this partnership with Actively Black, and knowing that, we're able to now collectively join forces, mm-hmm. put the flag on our apparel, get it out there even more, share your story. How does that feel for you?
Well, first of all, I don't know how this is going to sound, in the interview. I try to be as frank and honest as I can. But my family is blessed to have an association with your company. And just from the short time that I've known you and what I've heard from my team, which is my son Elijah and my nephew Scott, I'm very impressed with Actively Black and the people involved with it. And I'll just leave it at that.
Man, I'll just say that I'm incredibly humbled. The work that we're doing, the purpose for
Doing
us
good
building
work.
Actively Black, man, this is I just feel incredibly blessed, man. I get to sit next to living piece of Black history here today, you know what I mean? And you know, I look forward to continuing to build with you and continuing to build with the Juneteenth flag. We are preparing for Juneteenth 2025 and beyond. Thank you for joining me here today, Mr. Ben Haith, the creator of the Juneteenth flag. This has been another episode of No Fabrication.